Welcome to Podstar Pop-Up Studio at Step 2025. This is day 2, and joining us today as the first guest, please welcome Polly Dhaliwal. She's the COO of Enterprise Nation, the UK largest small business community and a products expert. I can't wait to chat with Polly. Polly, welcome to Step 2025 and what's the Pop-Up Studio. How are you today? How are you this morning?
I'm good. Yeah, no, I'm really excited. Lara, thank you so much for inviting me. But I just said to you, what a great place to do a podcast. Usually I'm either in my living room or in an office, but what an amazing spot. So yeah, it's a good start to the day.
I know you've just arrived from the UK, right?
I have.
How does it feel?
It's a lot warmer. I left my house with -2 degrees, so jumping to 25 is a perk. Do you know what? It's just nice to have a change of scene. The role that I do day to day is very much you're in the detail. So I always like coming different space, different place, but also being outside. A lot of events that you tend to go to in these theatres, no windows, it doesn't breed creativity. So yeah, already yesterday I've got so much I want to take back to the office. But then the team are always like, oh my God, she's been to another event. But yeah, it's all good. I'm enjoying it.
So what brings you to Step specifically?
So for those who know a little bit about Enterprise Nation, for those who don't, I'll give a bit of a background so you understand kind of why we're here. Enterprise Nation is a small business support platform. I started when we were a company of 5, so we were very much a startup. We're now at 50 employees. When I first joined, we had a community of sort of 3,000 small businesses, and our main aim was to match those small businesses to support. And when we talk about small businesses, startups, it's very much the little guys, the 0 to 10. And for us, what we wanted to do was make sure we match them to the right support at the right time. Now, that's not just funding. That's I'm looking for an accountant. I need marketing support. Am I ready to export to the Middle East, for example? Fast forward to 2025, we now reach 1 million small businesses all over the UK. So the growth has been phenomenal. The size of our team has scaled, the size of responsibility has scaled. But the reason for coming to the Middle East is I'm always keen to look at new technology, what are startups doing within this ecosystem, because it can be very different wherever you go. I think the UK, we have some exciting startups, a lot happening in the tech space. But I know when we initially spoke, there's also those creatives, the health and wellness brands, the food and drink brands, and they are the individuals that stick out for us. I think 33% of our community are a blend of health, wellness, beauty, food and drink.
That's interesting, yeah.
So it's not just tech, but it's great when the worlds collide, like a beauty tech brand, femtech brands, all this sort of stuff. So for me, it's how do we bring tech startups together a little bit more?
And so representing that UK community, so you coming to Dubai, Step Dubai, so there's a big ecosystem of Dubai startups with a huge, I think, tech focus as well. So what particular theme are you covering at Step, and how do you feel about this ecosystem?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I always like, as I say, whenever I go to a new country, the ecosystem, but also the attitude. So we run a partnership with MasterCard, and we always fly out to Washington once a year. I've done that for the last few years. Americans breed confidence, and you see that within their startup space. They also breed confidence around failure. In the UK, I don't think we look at that in a good way. Now in Dubai, I don't know how that works, but most startups fail, but it's okay, because the whole point of I was a part of 3 failing startups, but they taught me the most, more than the ones that were successful. So different countries look at startups in a different way. A lot of organizations, places, and big corporates think of startups as the little guy on their kitchen table. What we're actually seeing is startups which are 0 to 10 in size, turning over multi-million-pound companies because they're leveraging AI, social media platforms. You look at the brands on TikTok at the moment as well. One individual we spoke to last week in the UK, she's a team of 3 people. She's turning over 100 million and she's 26 years old and she's just got a beauty brand. So these brands, it's changing. Startups are not necessarily little guys who need lots of hand-holding support. What they actually need is a right connection to the right person. So when I look at UK as well as, the startup ecosystem that's coming together, there's a real focus at the moment on the next unicorn.
Yeah.
Who's going to be the next big brand that goes global, whatever. And I'm sure that's a big focus here in the Middle East as well, because it's what the government then talk about every single day. We created this brand. America are incredibly proud of X and, SpaceX as well. And it's, you have to help those guys who are starting out, otherwise you will never find your next unicorn. So for me in the UK as well, what we tend to find, and I asked this question yesterday to the Dubai Chamber, do the government invest a lot in business support? And I don't mean giving startups funding, I mean investment to organisations like this, big corporates, to put on business support programmes. Because in the UK, Enterprise Nation run one of the biggest support programs, which is mentoring for small businesses. And over 6,000 businesses have done it in the last 3 years. And then Dubai Chambers did say we get it's more privately funded.
Yeah.
So that is one thing I do quite like, that, there is a lot of private funding within the Middle East. I think I would love to see more of that in the UK. But that's kind of the biggest difference I see between UK and kind of Middle Eastern startups at the moment.
What does make a successful startup ecosystem, in your opinion? If we look at the, global successful ecosystem, or something that is still evolving, like Dubai, for example, what are the attributes that make a startup ecosystem a successful one?
Yeah, I mean, on a global scale, transparency, I think we're all learning as individuals. So this doesn't necessarily have to be, I go back to the point of the next unicorn. Each government wants to put their mark. Each country wants to say, we created this brand. Yeah. Meta went from here to here because of us in this country. But I think it's transparency of the failings that happen. The more open you can be, that means less startups make those mistakes. This is why these events are great, because you learn from the mistakes of people who have already done it. But I think in the space of what is it that we need on a global scale, I think we're very focused on the big guys at the moment, the 250 employees plus. I think for you to really become successful is looking at those new startups which are looking at new technology, which will then become big in the next 20 years. We're in this really exciting space of, the conversation is AI going to be, game changing in the next 10 years? It already is. Like, you can't say that, it might fall off a cliff. It's not. We've had it for the last 5-10 years. We use it every single day. So for me, it's just making sure that those new exciting startups, we're giving them a platform on a global scale to sort of showcase what they're doing, because there's some really exciting brands out there at the moment.
So you mentioned earlier that, you've noticed that, for example, in the US ecosystem, there's a big focus on how to handle failures. Because do you have any sort of tip or any practice or something that you've seen that helps to overcome the failure fast? Because I think, and why is it important for startups? Because once you fail fast, you probably need to
learn a bit quicker next time. I always think, when I think about failures, my job as a COO is to solve problems every day. Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah. I know what you mean. We will have to beep it though.
The chief of getting done. That's my kind of role. It's a glamorous title for getting stuff done every single day. But along that is failing every single day. So when we talk about failure, it's, entrepreneurs are made of steel. Like, they have to wake up and do stuff that they don't necessarily like doing. If I'm the food business who's great at cooking this particular product, then I've got to get up and look at my cash flow. I mean, that's not great for your soul. So how do you balance that as a startup? So there's failure every day that is constantly being knocked at you. When you're in a 9 to 5, you don't have to hear that noise because someone else kind of deals with it. But then when I look at failure, when I look at the 3 startups that I was a part of, one, I could say we had a great product, but it was the wrong time. If we waited during COVID, I think it could have done really well. We just ran out of funding in the other 2. So is it a failure? I mean, it all leads to steps to where you are today. So I feel like with the failures, you have to take the learnings from it into your next startup. Something that I take with Enterprise Nation is around people and the team that we're building. I remember when I was part of other startups and I'd sit in interviews, I always used to think that the talent would come from, they tick every single box on the job description. Now when I'm sitting in interviews, I actually don't really care about the job description. I actually just look at, could I take this person out for dinner, have a conversation outside of work? Do they bring our culture? Do they breed our culture? Do they embody our culture? That for me is more important. So there's little failures where when you're in the moment in previous startups, like, oh, we've lost another person because it didn't quite work out. But that actually saves you a lot of time down the line, because now I'm like, we hire a lot slower and we fire quicker, which isn't, it's not to sound brutal, but startups is a lot about people and getting people right.
So I think also what you mentioned, the reason I actually emphasize the failure aspect is for the ecosystems and for the startup in general to grow and evolve. I think managing failure and then restarting again is a very, very important thing. Yeah. So which brings me to the question. So the startup ecosystem in Dubai is about, I think we mentioned yesterday, about 11 years 11 years old, and it's been evolving. So compared to, let's say, a UK startup ecosystem, what do you see? What is the difference? What do you think UK practices could add value here, and what do you think you could take from Dubai or UAE ecosystem specifically and bring out to the UK?
Before I jump into that question, I think one thing, the ecosystem is 11 years young. However, I would actually look at it and say you have such a blend of communities where entrepreneurial elements are in their blood from a young age. I'm South Asian. Most of my family are business owners because they came to the UK from India and they didn't want to do a 9 till 5. They never had the qualifications. They didn't speak the first language. That's a lot of what happens in this country as well, because people are coming from Africa, India. So entrepreneurialism is the local lady in the village who has to think about, my husband's gone out to work, how am I going to make money? So that in itself is being an entrepreneur. I think within the UK, sometimes that gets lost because it's all about being an entrepreneur and this is what it looks like. That's changing. In terms of the ecosystem itself, one thing I love about the UK is that they do invest, the government invests in small businesses and the support. We're big champions for our small businesses to government. We are a voice for the businesses. I'm yet to see more of that in Dubai. Maybe I just haven't seen that. But then I also like that there's a lot of private investment. I hear a lot around VCs, investors, angel investors. Within the UK, that's kind of like a hidden network community. In the States, it's big as well. So I'd love to take that learning back to the UK of how it feels like that community of VCs, private investment is very closed. And you have to be part of that inner circle to get in. And if you do want funding, you have to rely on government funding, public sectors. In the UK, we have something called councils. I don't know if you have that here. Little areas within the UK will each get a pot of money from the UK government every year. How do they know where to spend that money and who they should invest that in as small businesses, startups? And often they're making decisions without data behind it. Whereas if you're a VC, angel investor, you've seen 10 previous food and drink brands that you've invested in. You know exactly what you're looking for to make sure that they make it past the third year before most businesses fail. So I think funding is probably the biggest thing around the ecosystem. One thing I like here in Dubai, and maybe because I'm South Asian in the UK, predominantly, white individuals who are building startups. One thing that lacks in the UK is showing transparency of business owners that look like me. The Asian community has built incredible success within the UK. When I come to the Middle East, I don't even think about that because there are so many business owners that have overcome a lot to get here and build their businesses. So that's always one thing. Enterprise Nation is all about reaching those who are hard to reach. And that's a topic within the UK. I'm not sure if that's a topic here in the Middle East.
I think the reaching out, someone probably, I've heard a lot that in the UAE, it's a little easier to sort of reach out to somebody somebody who is probably hard to reach in the UK or the US. But then how to make it work, how to take it forward. That's the part that we need to always think about. And the other thing that you mentioned also about different communities, Dubai and UAE in general is a very, very multinational, multicultural community.
Yeah.
So how do you sort of balance, and how do you build relationship, and how do you build business practices within the multicultural, multicultural, multinational community?
Yeah.
That is another challenge. So you need to make sure, and that is the part that is evolving and needs to evolve more, in my opinion. But coming back to your startup ecosystem, Enterprise Nation specifically. So we've noticed in the recent years, probably, I mean, it wasn't that noticeable before, but it has become so emphasized in the probably past 1, 2, 3 years, that a lot of corporations and a lot of executives who used to be part of the corporations are converting themselves into entrepreneurs, with a huge and a very important, significant experience and the skills. So, and I noticed that these two worlds have started to at least approaching each other here in Dubai, which was not the case, let's say, 10 years ago.
Sure.
It was absolutely impossible to imagine these two worlds talking.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you a question. So do you see these two worlds complementing each other? The question number one.
Yeah.
Do you see this happening in the UK? And do you see this happening here as well?
Yeah, I mean, to answer it bluntly, yes, because, I mean, just a bit of background about Enterprise Nation. We're a for-profit company. A lot of people come onto Enterprise Nation. Everything's free for a startup to access. So they always think we're a charity, but we're not. We have to make money every day. We have to pay our team. So that's always at the front and center of our minds. The way we make revenue is simply by working with big corporates. You know, we're surrounded by massive buildings here, and our job at Enterprise Nation is we work with 20 of the biggest tech companies in the UK. How we do that is they'll call us up and say, let's take Uber. We want to reach out to those hard-to-reach entrepreneurs in the UK who are driving our cars and doing Uber with the restaurants on the local high street. What we want to do is we want to give them funding. So can we run a grant program through Enterprise Nation? Can you build the technology? Can you build the process? And then can you market it to your 1 million small businesses? That's the conversations we tend to have. You know, Meta, we want to reach 1 million female entrepreneurs. How do we do that over 5 years? Banks that I can't really name, we want to mentor young entrepreneurs. Can we do that through your program? So they invest in us to give back to the startup community. So there's definitely a world where I don't know whether in Dubai this is yet to be done, but how do big corporates invest in startup programs, but on a big scale to reach, you know, how do banks run mentoring programs? How do they drop funding into the startup community? Now, your point around corporates themselves being more entrepreneurial, one thing I tend to hear when I talk to corporates, because we talk to like the CSR part of the company or the marketing department, and they say we run like a startup in a big corporate, and I hear that a lot, which can be good because there's nothing better than having an entrepreneurial individual in a corporate company, because what they like is speed and they like to fail fast, whereas in corporates it's usually the opposite. A lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of questions to be asked, which is fine, they're a big corporate. But this entrepreneurial spirit within corporates is really important, and I think they're realising we won't attract new talent by doing traditional recruitment. So we have to look at how we become more entrepreneurial within our own ecosystem. It's really hard for corporates to test out new technology. Let's take AI. However, if they work with an AI-driven startup to, I don't know, match their, let's take open banking, I'm talking about it today. A big bank is going to struggle to rapidly look at open banking and bring that into a small business community without working with a startup or small business themselves. So I feel the worlds have to collide to make it work. And a lot of entrepreneurs come from a corporate world. You know, I worked in the corporate world for only 3 years, but I absolutely hated it. It just wasn't a part of like my my DNA. I was like, this isn't meant to be me. You know, one job that I had, I rang my mum 5 minutes on my first day and I said, can I quit today? She was like, no, Polly, you have to stay. She's like, at least give it 3 months. But I was like, I feel locked in being told that you have to make 100 calls today. I was like, oh, this is just, you know, I want to be able to showcase what I can do every day, but also solve problems every day, not be told what problems to solve as such. So yeah, in short, I'd say yes, the worlds have to collide. In the UK, I think we do it okay, but it can always be better. But what an exciting time in Dubai that, you know, you guys are 11 years young in your ecosystem. And what an opportunity. If you're a startup, if you're listening to this, knock on the doors of the big corporates and say, we have a product, we have a program, and this is what we think it can do if we dropped it to your banking customers, your Microsoft users, for example. I would love if we still had that opportunity in the UK, but, you know, it's done every single day.
So what do you think for the big corporation? How do they turn to your stick to the startups and the solutions that startups are offering? And how do they choose the startups to work with? So small startups, this is what you need to achieve to be able to make it through, probably.
Yeah, really simple. Does it solve a problem? I mean, if you're talking about, I don't know, if you're a food brand and you're reaching out to a bank, it's not solving a problem that the head of marketing in a massive bank like HSBC, who are right next to us, are thinking of every day. They're thinking about something else. So if I was a corporate, I'd always look at, is it cheaper for me to work with a startable small business and bring them in or hire them as contractors, program runners, like, you know, Enterprise Nation, that a lot of corporates do that with Enterprise Nation. Is it cheaper for us to do that rather than hire 10 people full time to do this? And does it solve a problem that our big bosses are looking for us to solve? So a lot of when we do renewals with our partners, we have a session with them at the start of the year and we say, what are your key focuses for this year? What are the problems you are trying to solve? What audience are you trying to reach? Now then, if you take that back as a startup, you know, you can hear that at events from, you know, CEOs of big organizations. They will say, these are the problems we're trying to solve. This is the audience we're trying to reach. If you can then answer that within one page, keep it short, they're very time poor, keep it short and say, look, my product solves this problem, my service solves this problem, and it also helps this audience. So again, I go back to a bank because they're right next to me. One big problem of a bank right now is that they need to reach a younger audience. If you're a startable small business that has thousands, millions of people who are young, get in touch with them, because what they're finding is they're losing out to the fintech brands at the moment because they are quick in terms of what they're creating. So again, that's just an example of how if I was a startable small business, look at the problem you're going to solve for that end user, which is the big corporate, and the audience that you'll help them reach in the end as well.
So I think also it makes any startup, any business that is trying to make it through to close another market gap is also understanding what kind of product they're producing and why they're doing that, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just because I need to earn money, but it's because because one of the attributes of a startup ecosystem is driving innovation, right?
Completely.
So I was just thinking when I was listening to you. So I think there's the most critical differentiator between, let's say, a startup ecosystem and, let's say, an agency model is that the startups are driving that innovation, right? So they are trying to disrupt offering new business models, offering new solutions to the market, right? So, and when we look at the startups and the businesses from that perspective, they definitely need to understand, right, who they are and why they're doing that, and why is it bank or why is it another niche, for example.
Yeah.
So, from skill set perspective, how do you see the two worlds of corporations and the startups? How do they complement each other? I know you mentioned that the speed and the attitude and the ability of a startup executive, let's say a startup founder, working later on for a corporation, I'm not sure actually if the startup is successful, whether it is happening at all, but anyway, that definitely complements the culture of the corporation. Also, quite difficult to fit in, right?
Yeah.
Within the processes. Does it work back, do you think, also from the corporates to startups?
Yeah, I think one thing that corporates tend to give us is the governance, the legislation that we don't talk a lot about. You know, cybersecurity, it's a bit of a snooze topic, I hate to say, for small businesses. They don't wake up and they're like, I'm going to solve cybersecurity in my business today, unfortunately, to all those cybersecurity startups out there. Sorry, but that is the truth. However, when they surveyed, again, MasterCard did this great survey around top problems on the brains of startups. I think it was 1,000 startups. 48% said that they are worried about cybersecurity when they go to bed at night. So the problem is there for cybersecurity companies to solve, but it's not a problem that they want to solve. So for me, when I look at big corporates, they have governance, legislation, all that bureaucracy all sorted. And I think that's the positive for a startup. And yeah, when you talk about startups bringing skills into corporates, it's definitely that innovation side of things. Startups are bred out of disrupting traditional ecosystems and processes. You know, 10, 15 years ago, if I was coming to an event every single day, I'd be waving down a cab. Whereas I just wait in my lobby and book a Uber. Mm-hmm. Uber came out of the problem of trying to solve a traditional, very traditional ecosystem of hailing a cab. They said, we want to solve a problem and we want to remove having our own taxis, etc. So, you know, what an incredible business they've built. And I see everyone who stood next to me waiting for their Uber. And that is the incredible leadership of disrupting a traditional sector. So I think in terms of if I was also a corporate looking at startups, that mindset of, and I suppose character of an entrepreneur has to be brought into corporates. Entrepreneurs are so exciting when they're having their best day because what they do really well is they park all that cash flow problems. My team members are annoying me. They're not doing what they should be. But when you get them on a stage talking about the product that they're building, what they love, what they're trying to disrupt, they are incredible and they will shake up a corporate very quickly. Corporates can be seen as very traditional, stuffy. Not all of them, but some of them. So I think that works. But yeah, I mean, from corporates working with startups, small businesses. Sorry, that would be my second point as well. Cybersecurity legislation, etc. But also access to new markets. A lot of corporates that you'll see here, I see them in the UK, I'll see them in America. That's what a big corporate can give you, access to global markets. It's really hard to knock on doors on your own. Whenever we look to new markets, we work with our partners. And for a startup to truly become, look, there's startups who just want to trade in Dubai. That's it. They know their goal, but then there are startups who want to be the next big thing.
True.
So if they want to access new markets and become the next big thing, partners will help you out. And the government, you know, they are the ones that will give you funding to take their brand that you kind of started in their country to other countries as well. So yeah, they're probably the two things. The legislation and the access to new markets is what corporates can give to small businesses.
That's brilliant. So what do you expect from STEP today? So what are your expectations? What are you looking for to get?
Yeah, I mean, whenever I come to events, I love seeing, look, when we put on events, we run 300 events a year. I love looking out to an audience and seeing people take notes. I've seen a lot of that today. So what I love to look at is startups learning from people who have A, already done it, and B, who can help them a bit more. So, you know, I looked at Dubai Chamber. It was a really small room yesterday that they had, but it was packed. And everyone was taking pictures of their slides. That for me is a really good sign of a great session, because people are like, that's what I needed from this event. There's no topic in particular. I'm talking about open finance, open banking in the finance sector for small businesses later. That for me is nerd alert, but that is exciting. I think if you can access financial data on behalf of small businesses, you can match them to support a lot quicker. I also like the creative side. You know, there's a health and wellness organisation. It's called Anchor.
Yeah. I love it because they started it last year, I think.
Yeah, and they were here, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And for me, being an entrepreneur, it's a lonely world out there. You know, a lot of these entrepreneurs here, they probably 1 to 2 people in their companies.
Yeah.
It's lonely, you know. they don't even talk about the mental health side of things of being an entrepreneur. Waking up every single day can be tricky. So, even bringing that side of things into the mix is really important, because you really have to support the startup so they can take it to the next level every day.
That's amazing. And so thank you very much for giving us this overview. Also, it was absolutely brilliant to hear what's happening in the UK and what kind of organization you're supporting and the programs that are being initiated in the UK. So looking forward for you to be here, and good luck with the panels and conversations today. Great networking, and we'll stay in touch for sure. I'm pretty sure this is not the last time we talk. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.